she loved me.
This is going to be a fun one. The book is If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nowlin. I was looking for books, as morbid as it sounds, about death because I wanted to know how authors were handling the idea of somebody close to you dying. This book was not about that at all. If you don't know anything about writing, there is a key event and an inciting event. The key event is what gets the story started, and then the inciting event is what brings the protagonist into the novel. The death of Finney is essentially the inciting event, but it actually doesn't happen until the end of the novel, but it's the premise of the novel and it's what opens the novel. We don't see whatever her name is, Autumn, grieving Finney until the very end of the novel, and even then it's like almost epilogue-ish, but we'll get into that when we get there. I thought this book, like, honest to goodness, my final impression was, if this is what it looks like to be traditionally published, I do not want to know what our future looks like. Granted, if this one, I didn't do my research, I should have, so shoot me. If this had been a self-published book and it goes viral, it's always possible that a publisher will see that and approach the author and then retroactively publish it because they see there can be money from this book. Or it could have just been like, I saw someone on TikTok who her premise did so well when she was posting it that she had agents approaching her about working together. In the end, it didn't work out for her because I guess the writing didn't live up to the premise. But I don't understand why people liked this book. I would love if you, well, not only if you would like, subscribe, and comment, but if you would tell me what was so great to you about this novel, because it's young adult and romance. I can see how it speaks to its intended audience, but in terms of writing and plot, there's no finesse. I was waiting and waiting and waiting. The book spans 4 years, and that was 4 years too long. But my thought was, we open with Finney dying. The idea is he wouldn't have died if he had been with Autumn. So I thought him dying could have been maybe the first plot point. Maybe it was the midpoint. I did not think it was going to be the I did not think it was essentially going to be the denouement. Sorry, I totally went blank there and I could not remember what I was trying to say. But essentially, it's not even the climax. It is the denouement is when the big resolution essentially has happened and we're coming down and finishing the book. In a way, I guess you could say his death was that point of that climax of resolution, and her reaction to it and the surprise that we get at the end is the denouement. But I was waiting and waiting for us to hit that point so then we could see the aftermath. So at this point, as a reader, I felt gypped. Yes, I used the word gypped. I thought we were building up. We were getting a brief backstory of the two because they had been best friends. They were born a week apart. Their mothers were best friends. And then they did drift apart. So I thought we were just going to get a slight backstory about what happened to them, why she cites in the beginning that if he had been with her rather than his girlfriend Sylvie, he wouldn't have died. So obviously somehow they reconnected, or I don't know, maybe she realizes that she is in love with him. If he had chosen her over Sylvie, then things would have been different. But he kept going and going and going. And a lot of these scenes, in my opinion, were pointless. They were filler. They would be super short, or she would have this opportunity to end with a really great statement What was it? It was a scene. We have this really great scene. We could have stopped right there, only to have like 4 more sentences, and we're left hanging like on this really open note, and not in a good way, not in a cliffhanger kind of way, but in a Nowlin just needed to have the last word, which she's always gonna have the last word. Her writing just wasn't strong. It didn't make a statement. I know in writing that a voice tag, the best way to do that is to just say said, not asked or whispered or screamed or whatever. It's just say she said, she said, she said, because eventually the reader tunes it out. It's just so neutralized that you just bypass it as you're reading. But it stuck out to me. So she also lacked variety, but then at the same time, I felt like we didn't have enough action. We didn't have enough scene. That so much of this was Autumn's thoughts and Autumn's opinions and Autumn's insecurities. I don't want to be stuck in your head the whole time. It's the telling versus showing, essentially. Is I don't want Autumn going moment by moment, telling me what's happening. I want to see what's happening. And I didn't get enough of that. We open and it is Finney has died. We do not know how. We do know there was some sort of car accident involved, and that Sylvie survived. And we jump into freshman year. We learn their whole backstory. They were BFFs. Autumn, I felt like Autumn was a super stereotype. She was almost a caricature. Nowlin wanted her to be unique, which is fine. I like diversity. I like characters who aren't always popular or chasing popularity. But she would give Autumn quirks without any basis. There was no rationale behind why Autumn was so weird. Autumn just needs to be weird. Autumn just needs to be different. She's left-handed, and that's different. She's a strange duck. Throughout her life, though, she's pretty. So even though the kids didn't care she was pretty, it actually made things worse. But adults always knew she was pretty, and adults would tell her she was pretty. But it's almost like that stereotype of pretty, but I don't know it. She was pretty, but she did know it, but it didn't matter to her. And of course, we get these instances in the book where it's like, oh, well, you know all the guys had a crush on you. You know Finney was in love with you. And she's like, but why? They liked me? Are you that obtuse? We know that Finney would always stand up for her. And then in middle school, they started to drift apart. For once, because she was pretty, her weirdness worked in her favor. So she was part of the popular group, which I liked what Nowlin did with this in the end, and I'll spoil that right now because otherwise I might forget. She has never had friends aside from Finney. She befriends a girl named Sasha, and then there's 2 other girls. One is Alexis. Maybe there's 3. I don't know their names. They're interchangeable. They don't matter. But they are the cool kids. And even though Finney is cute, and he's athletic, and he's nice, he's not necessarily popular. At the end of the book, what we learn is that he felt like she rejected him for this newfound popularity, which we also learn, spoiler, that they didn't just drift apart. He kissed her and it freaked her out. Here's another cliche. Does he kiss me because he likes me? Or was I just like a test subject? Anyways, she's popular, and they're all thinking about trying out for cheerleading. In the end, Autumn is like, I just can't handle coming up with a routine of my own and performing it. So she doesn't try out, and then Sasha doesn't make it, which I thought was silly for Autumn, where if these girls are your friends and you all want to do it together, why don't you enlist their help? If it looks like they're not struggling with this and you still want to achieve this goal, why not ask your friends for help? It was a cop-out. So much was a cop-out. She and Sasha find themselves on one side of the line, and the other girls in their group are on this other. And it's like things are kind of weird, but they're still friends until one day Sasha and Autumn show up to school, and the girls braided their hair, and they never told Sasha and Autumn, so that automatically meant that they were kicked out of the group. But then Finney's side of it, because when he another spoiler, he reveals to her, I've been in love with you. Duh. I started hanging out with the cheerleaders because he becomes uber popular. I started hanging out with them because last I heard you wanted to be one of them, only to learn that you didn't do it. And from their side, you thought you were too good for them. What I liked was Autumn had like one moment of maturity, one moment of clarity and growth where she says, how many other things does Finney have a different side of the story for? Way to go, girl. Finally. Asking the right questions. We enter freshman year. I know it's taking me forever. I'm so sorry. Sasha is her only friend. And of course, she's seen all of her friends in their cheerleading outfits. Like, you know, like cheerleaders are always portrayed like giggly and flouncy. She's at the school bus stop. She is avoiding Finney. He walks up and he may or may not have been talking to her, but another girl answers and they start chatting, and this other girl is Sylvie. Some point after that, those two start dating. Autumn, who is a rebel without a cause, she just has to stand out and do things differently. She just cannot fall into a box, which that's exactly what she does. She and Sasha start eating outside on the steps that she dubs the steps to nowhere. I thought this was going to play into something, and it never does. All it does is it introduces her to a new friend group. This is where she, freshman year, meets her boyfriend, Jamie. Here's a little bit of foreshadowing. She and Sasha compete for his attention. She ends up winning. Now I'm like, okay, what's going to happen with Jamie? Almost immediately, Jamie starts telling her he loves her, and then he's like, I think we should take things to the next level. So basically, we've been together for 2 weeks, let's have sex. So I'm thinking, Jamie's not a good dude. This is the only thing he's after. We do throughout the novel see them stepping over boundaries, going further, but she is insistent that she is not gonna sleep with him. She's also back and forth as to whether or not she loves him or not, which on one hand is great. She's at this point, 14, 15-year-old kid. That is exactly what we're going through. We think we're in love, but we don't really know what love is. In the end, she's not actually sold on Jamie. I thought it very odd that she had such strong convictions about sleeping with him, because she doesn't feel like a character with strong convictions. As much as she's supposed to be strong and independent and unique, she's a stereotype. I fully expected her to succumb to peer pressure because everybody's doing it. And Jamie is consistently bringing it up. And then he gets upset when she doesn't want to do it. So I was just waiting for her to realize Jamie is not the one for her and for them to go their separate ways. Oh, but no, they go all through high school, which I'm just going to continue to spoil things here. Throughout high school, she and Finney are naturally thrown together because their mothers are best friends. They've begun to reconnect slowly. While she's hanging out with him sometimes, apparently Jamie is also hanging out with Sasha. Finney brings this up to her and she's like, oh, they're friends, it's fine. And I'm like, in the back of my head, because she's very needy and she's very insecure in a lot of ways. I would have, in the back of my head, because when I was a teenager, I was very insecure, I would have been like, well, they're hanging out alone? Is something going on? She used to like him and he kind of seemed to like her to some extent, so should I be worried? No worries whatsoever. But can you guess what happens? So this entire novel, he's like, I love you, I love you, I love you. And I'm waiting for it to be an empty I love you. Like, this was his goal. This was his way. Because we all know that's the stereotype. Boys say what girls want to hear so they can get what they want. So this is what I'm expecting Jamie to be. But they keep persevering. And she's always like, I love you. Do you love me? Are we going to be together forever? Are you ever going to leave me? But outside of those, they don't have any issues. They don't have any quarrels. Prom rolls around. He comes and he gets her. They have a great prom. I think it is not too long after, maybe it's like that night, he gives her a kiss or something, or she gives him a kiss, but it's like kiss on the cheek because he, I guess moves so that she can kiss him on the mouth. And I'm like, uh-oh, something's coming. And he's like, hey, can I come over? We need to talk. And at this point, she had promised him that she would sleep with him. Full disclosure, this book was so boring. One, the narrator was atrocious. And so I sped it up, and it dragged so much that I definitely skipped a couple hours. I don't actually know when she promised she'd sleep with him, but she had promised. So this seemed to me or to her, that this was what he wanted to talk about, that he was going to take her up on her promise, when in actuality, he was just going to break up with her because he and Sasha had fallen in love. Or not fallen in love, but they discovered they had feelings for each other. I did like the parallel because something happens with her and Finney while he is still with Sylvie. And she's like, basically, if this is what happened between Jamie and Sasha, then I guess I understand. So I like that we went there. But it came out of the blue. His excuse was, you're too needy. We'd had mentions that she suffers from depression. Did I see any of that? No. In that she was just too needy, which I guess it's all those times where she's like, are you gonna leave me? Are you gonna love me forever? I love you. Do you love me? So for me, that was just annoying and whiny. It wasn't necessarily needy, but that's because we had a bunch of disparate flashes that acted as scenes rather than fully fleshed scenes that showed me her relationship with Jamie, that showed me her relationship with her friends, that really dug into who she was. We had so many scenes that we just didn't need, but I've already said that, so we're going to leave it at 2 rather than beat a dead horse. We have one mention of the doctor upping her prescription. We have a mention of the fact that winter depresses her, and we see her, I guess, constantly seeking his affirmation of love, which to me, that's just a needy teenage girl. That is not a girl with issues who is constantly needing to be reaffirmed. We continued going through all of their high school years. Junior year, she's hanging out with her friends. They are taking all those magazine quizzes. She is commenting on how they're essentially cheating the system because they have gleaned that there's always 2 answers on either side of the extreme, and one that, it's Goldilocks and the 3 bears, too hot, too cold, just right. And one of the friends is like, oh, well, you should take this quiz of, is your friend or is he in love with you, or something like that. And she's like, who are you talking about? And like, oh, well, Finney, of course. She's like, but we're not even friends anymore. They point out, well, you'd been friends before, so let's see, was he in love with you? And according to this, yes, he was in love with her. This was the one quiz that gave her pause because the answers weren't necessarily easy to answer. This leads her into a train of thought of, do I love him? She decides that yes, on some level, I do love him. Not like I love Jamie, but I do love him. Okay, so what is this supposed to mean? The vagueness of it, I felt like Nowlin was trying really hard to do things that she doesn't have the skill to do, or at least not at this point. Maybe she has honed her skill. I do not plan on ever reading another one of her books. At this point is when she kind of starts to allow herself to feel things about him. She sees him shirtless and she can't stop ogling him. She's getting jealous whenever he's with Sylvie, and she's feeling protective about him when Sylvie breaks up with him, and I don't know. It was all very superficial. There's a lot that went on in this book. I really do not feel like talking about it because it doesn't matter. I did think there's one thing that was interesting where one of her friends, so Jamie wants to sleep with her, and she says no. We get to a point where they're like a year, and one of the other friends is at 1.5 years with her boyfriend, so they go to this homecoming dance. And this is like, her friend group is supposed to be like the outcast friend group, and they do everything contrary to what they should do. but then they're also like really smart. So it's not that outcasts can't be smart, but Nowlin was trying to put them in boxes, but they didn't meld together. It was just a box and a box and a box. It wasn't a box and a box and a box. It was just lined up. They go to this homecoming dance. One of the friends says, hey, look, I'm not actually going to spend the night here. I'm going to go all the way with my boyfriend. This, kind of starts a domino effect. And then one of the other friends ends up getting pregnant. So Brooke and Noah have been together a year and a half. And then Angie had dated this dude named Mike from another school. They break up. At some point, she starts dating this guy named Dave. I think they called him Dapper Dave. Preppy Dave. That's what his name was. Preppy Dave. This is the part that I missed because I fast forwarded. And then I had to rewind because I thought that she was actually talking about Brooke. And I was like, well, I thought Brooke was with Noah and they were like for life. Which in a sense, I'm like, Autumn and Jamie are together for 4 years. Sylvie and Finney are together for 4 years. Brooke and Noah are together for 4.5, 5 years. And then Sasha, I think she started dating this dude named Alex. And they were together all through high school. What's in the water here? Like, can we please make something stand out? Can we please make somebody here unique, like the actual high school student? Yeah, I thought that Brooke was the one that got pregnant, and I was like, ooh, that's kind of interesting, because is this a scandal? When did she and Noah break up? No, it was Angie. They end up getting married, and then they live in his family's basement, which I thought was really interesting that Nowlin made a point of saying this apartment was not for them to have fun in, it was for them to live in. So basically, it was not a place that all their friends were going to be coming to and hanging out in. They do, but they don't support this decision that these two have made. Angie has her baby, and by this point, Autumn and Jamie have broken up. And she's like, I guess I can't be friends with any of these people anymore because Brooke is Jamie's cousin. Angie's having her baby. I'm not talking to Sasha. So Angie is like, hey, come see the baby. It turns out all of her friend group are there. And I kind of hated this part. No, not kind of. I did. I disliked this part. I personally despise what Jamie and Sasha did and how they went behind Autumn's back. I know he's been pushing Autumn to sleep with him this entire book. When he breaks up with her and he tells her about his and Sasha's new feelings, she automatically jumps to this conclusion that they slept together. He's like, yeah, well, on prom, when I was getting your prom corsage, we went together and we ended up sleeping together. We had how much time before prom for things to start looking fishy? And we had nothing, and then you just dropped the bomb on us? There's no buildup. There was no development. So I'm assuming Sasha hadn't slept with anybody because when she heard about their plans, she was like, oh, I guess I'm going to be the last one. So did you guys get a corsage together and then you just fell into bed together? You didn't have to do any work at all? How did this happen? In any case, it made me really angry. I mean, it's kind of in a good way. Like, I think we need this kind of tension and drama in our lives to help grow us and just to make it more realistic. But then we get to the hospital, and even though they're not like huggy and kissy, they're very obviously a couple. And I wanted them to have a little bit more respect for Autumn because they knew they'd done something wrong. Although they wouldn't admit it, it was kind of Autumn's fault. They were unapologetic and they thought, oh, like we can just get past this and we can be friends. Why are you acting this way? Well, because you are the two most important people in my life and you cheated on me. But I wished Nowlin had written it differently. It just goes back to the fact that her characterization is weak. I don't even know how old she is, but it felt like she was a 17-year-old kid writing what a 17-year-old wants to hear, putting the ideal across there. It did not feel mature at all. Anyways, we get to them breaking up and she is devastated. She refuses when her mom comes and suggests all these other friends of hers. She's like, no, like they're all connected to Jamie and Sasha. I'm not going to do that. She fetches Finn who automatically comes over because it's just a very stereotypical relationship that Nowlin has created for them, where even though they're not really good friends, they're kind of friends, but because Finney has been in love with her his entire life, he is gonna drop everything when she needs someone. And of course, no, she's not needy. He's always taking care of her and he always will. They start to really reconnect. And then, of course, we get this other cliched instance where they go to pick up his best friend Jack, which reminds me, one of the pointless dramas slash scenes in this novel is, even though Autumn and her friend group have claimed the stairs to nowhere, for some reason they have claimed a table inside. I guess maybe they've outgrown the stairs to nowhere and they want to go. Like, for me, I would have been okay if it was rainy days. Bad weather, we eat inside. That makes sense. But apparently they have a table in the lunchroom. And for some reason, like literally, we are given no explanation. Finney and his popular group have decided they're going to use it. So now there's this lunchroom war between the two factions. Every day they're fighting to get there first. They're not even going to try to be civil with each other in class and whatnot, like outside. And I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. On one hand, it was a great idea. It really could have led somewhere. But the popular group just decides, we want a new table. We're going to take their table. And then the like uncool, cool rebel groups like, no, you're not. We're going to fight for our right to eat at our lunch table that we claimed. I mean, like, that's legit, guys. You have your chair in class. You have your table at lunch. Nobody should take it from you. But we got no explanation. My favorite part of it was when it was Finney's turn. And this is when I thought Nowlin did have a little finesse here, where Sylvie says, Finney, you need to go stake your claim on the table today. And Autumn shows up and she's like, oh, so are you eating with us today at our table? And I was like, that was pretty killer. I love it because now she is leveraging their relationship, friendship, to manipulate him out of doing what he's supposed to do. I wished we'd gotten more from this, but like literally we have an entire chapter of them fighting over a table just for her to deliver a one-liner, and it's fine. No problems anymore. I guess they've reconnected enough, and she was, and I don't know, I thought this was pointless too. She gets sick. It just happens to be at finals, like that was important. It wasn't, but she's like, no, I'm gonna stick it out and take my finals. She has to leave the class to throw up, and now of course everybody's like, oh well, you're pregnant. Or at least those popular girls that she used to be friends with are starting to spread this rumor. So she asks Finney, she's like, would you please ask your friends not to spread this rumor? It's a lie. When he does it, it gives Sylvie enough of an issue that she breaks up with him, which I was fully expecting him to have actually been the one to break up with her because his feelings are getting stronger for Autumn and blah, 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 but no, it's not. Then Autumn is kind of forced to spend time with Sylvie. They're expected, for some reason, I think maybe Finney or someone is like, you just be nice to her, just get along. That's what I'm asking her to do to you. But it was baseless. Like, it went absolutely nowhere. We never got to know Sylvie. All we were told, like literally, we were told she's not what you think. You have misjudged her. Do we actually see Sylvie? There is a moment at a party where it's at Autumn's house and Sylvie is enraptured by Jamie, who is apparently really charismatic. And she's like, you know what? I wouldn't put it past her. I wouldn't doubt if Sylvie has fallen in love with Jamie. For me, this is a perfect moment to cause some drama. No, nothing. We get to the end. She and Finney are hanging out. They go to pick up his best friend Jack, and Jack's like, are you gonna break his heart again? Oh gosh, here we go. One, why Jack is so friendly to Autumn, I don't know, because my experience as a teenager was you were in your group and that was it. Like, if somebody was not cool enough for you, you didn't give them the time of day. You hated them on principle. But yeah, I guess Jack has a heart of gold. And this is when Autumn's like, what? All the secrets are revealed about how Finney feels about her. And I was like, oh my gosh, Autumn, I thought you were smart. She's not. It's just, again, Nowlin's teenage ideals of how we would all love to learn that the hot guy has had the hots for us our entire lives. Apparently, this is the summer of Autumn getting drunk. Sylvie goes to Europe for the summer, so they are free to hang out as much as they want. They literally stay up all night. They've invented a new meal time, which is after midnight but before breakfast. They just drink all the time, they hang out all the time, they eat all the time, they're falling in love apparently. One day, so Finny, sorry, his friends call him Finn, but she calls him Finny, and I kind of think Finny's funner, which is not a word. He's like, look, I'm gonna break up with Sylvie. And she's like, well, why? And he goes, because she's not the one I want to be with. Autumn also happens to be a very talented, aspiring writer, and she's been working on a novel which she refuses to let him read because she, quote, is afraid he will read into things and think that they represent fact when they're just fiction, which obviously means it's fact, and she just doesn't want to admit it because she's a stereotype. One day, a week or two after he says he's going to break up with Sylvie and he doesn't do it, and he tells her it's because he thinks it's something that should be done in person, not over the phone. So she has this brainstorm. I think they'd all gotten drunk, and then she went home to change and stuff. They're next door neighbors. She was gonna go back, but she was hit by inspiration. She spent the whole day writing, and this is the point where she tells him, because he's like, are you coming over? And she's like, I'm writing. He's like, are you gonna let me read it? And she's like, no. He convinces her to let him read it. Nowlin includes this book in the book. It is the cheesiest, worst written thing I've ever read. I fast forwarded because I didn't need it to know that it was hers and Finny's love story with different character names. On one hand, I'm like, okay, you know what? Nowlin, if you want to make this a really terrible book because she's a 17-year-old who has no real experience writing, I'm actually okay with that. But I genuinely think Nowlin thought this was a good little story. And did we actually need the entire novel written out for us in this novel? No, we did not. A synopsis would have been fine. Finny automatically responds to this, and he's like, look, I love you. I like you. I want to be with you. That's when they hash everything out about, why did you walk away from me when we were 13? Like, why'd you abandon me? And she's like, oh, well, because you kissed me and I didn't know what it meant. And I'm like, okay, you know what? At 13, it could have freaked me out if my best friend had kissed me out of the blue and I didn't know that was what our relationship was. But also like, I don't know. Again, it was just very stereotypical. They kiss, at which point, because he knows all about how she wouldn't sleep with Jamie, because she does also have this idea as to what the perfect night would be like to lose her V card. They start kissing. She pulls away and he's like, oh, do you want me to stop? She's like, no, I want you to keep going. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They do the deed. And this whole time I've also wondered, like, did he go all the way with Sylvie, or was he holding out for Autumn? And this was another missed opportunity where she asks, or she says, I wish I'd been your first. And he was like, kind of in many ways you were. And he tells her how the only way that he could sleep with Sylvie was when she was inebriated. And when she was inebriated, it wasn't good. Why can she only do it when she's inebriated? And he's like, well, because somebody hurt her when she was younger. And then we keep going. And I'm like, if we hadn't gone through 4 years to make this book, we could have learned so much about Sylvie. We're just going to bypass the fact that she was molested. Why even bring it up? And again, it felt very cliched, like, I've always been in love with you. I wanted you to be my first, but you weren't. So how can I explain away why, even though I slept with somebody else, it didn't matter? Or I would have preferred if he said, because it wasn't you. Okay, appeal to my teenage heartstrings, warm my cold, cold heart. Although I probably still would have been like, oh my God. Nowlin wasn't necessarily ready to write this book. This was like a Wattpad novel, which if you've ever read the Before Whatever series about Harry Styles, but she couldn't use Harry Styles because you can't actually use real people. After, that's what it's called, the After series, which is terrible. Like, the writing is, I would rather read Twilight. And if you've been watching my channel, you know where that joke is coming from. So they slept together. They did not use protection. That next day, they wake up and he's like, I gotta go pick up Sylvie from the airport. I'm gonna break up with her. It's raining. They fight. Somehow I missed this part. It's only because I read somebody else's review. So thank you for all you people who actually wrote fully formed reviews. They spin out of control. He loses control of the car because they're arguing and he's distracted. Sylvie, naturally, is not wearing her seatbelt. She is ejected from his little red sports car. He was wearing a seatbelt, but when he gets out of the car to go check on her, make sure she's okay, and I guess he stepped in a puddle that somehow was connected to maybe a power line. In some shape, form, or fashion, it was electrified and he dies. Autumn's like, well, if he'd been with me, that never would have happened. She spirals. She decides to unalive herself. She wakes up in the hospital, and when the doctor comes in to check on her, they discover that she is carrying Finney's child. She is struggling with whether or not she should keep this child. She ultimately determines, based off of her memory of him holding Angie's baby, that he would have wanted to keep this child, and that is literally where we end. She just cuts us off at the knees. I love a tragedy. I love the idea of carrying the name on, of this person, something about this person being carried forth so that they're not entirely gone. I love the idea that even though she never really got to have Finney, she got to have this part of Finney, and that Finney will live on through this child. But on the other hand, like I keep saying, there's nothing nuanced about this. It was expected. Like, once we knew they weren't protected, we knew that she was gonna get pregnant. And because we already knew Finney died, we knew this was what was gonna happen, because in now this teenage dream world, this is what needs to happen. That's all I have to say. Thank you for sitting through my rant. I would still love to know what you think, and I'll see you later. Bye.